So it's kind of like, it was my studio because I had bands. I had my own bands for years. I was a lead singer in my own groups for years. And then I had other bands. And then my wife at the time had a band, and I'd record my friends' bands. So this guy comes walking in, Chris comes walking in. First thing he looks around and he goes, I swear, first thing he said, and I don't know why he says this because it's like paint buckets in there. He looks around and goes like, you could make $1 million in here. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, man, you clean up these paint buckets, paint these walls purple, put a Chinese lamp over here. And he had all these weird ideas like, who is this guy? But then I thought about it. I thought, actually, purple's a great idea. So I painted the walls purple, got the Chinese lamp, and he would come by and he'd have, most of what he said I didn't understand, but every once in a while he'd say something. I was like, that's actually a really good idea. And then he started asking me, like, do you know things, like, you thought about working on rap records? I'm like, no, I mean, what? You mean the boom? The guys talk over the boom, boom, and they go, blah, blah, blah. That? Yeah, man, it's really cool. So, yeah, but I'm willing to try anything. So he brought over some friends, and I think he got me some sessions, and I didn't understand the music, but I liked the people, and I thought, hey, this is cool. Plus, they let me make the drums really big, and you know, they're very open people that he was bringing over. And this was way more hip hop, way more artsy. The guys he was bringing over, guys he had known up in Chicago and had moved to Atlanta. So it was that kind of thing, more underground hip hop. And I kind of got into it. And then he started talking about this idea of doing a compilation record that we would fund. And he'd bring in all these rappers from out Atlanta because this is going to be huge. Rap's going to be huge. I'm like, whatever, man. He said, oh, I know this guy named Bone Crusher and this other guy. And he knew all these guys, but nobody was famous. They were just friends of his. And now Bone was working on records. They were working on stuff. Little John had a regional hit called Who You With. Wasn't massive, but it was big. He was working at a radio station and a record label, but I didn't know any of that. So he brings over all these guys. And we do this project called Full Contact Sports. We ended up actually finishing the album, but it was a lot of fun. I really liked all these people, and I was really bored with rock and roll at the time because in the 90s, I thought rock and roll just sucked ass. Every time I tried to turn up the drums or, hey, let's do a guitar solo, or let's just bring up the bass, they'd be like, everybody was like so careful. We can't actually make it sound cool. We're too cool to sound cool. I'm like, man. Whereas working on rap and hip hop records is like, hey, can I, crank up the bass? Or like, do whatever. There was never any conversations because in rock and roll, and I still get this to this day, if you come up with an idea during a rock session, everybody has to have a fucking conversation about it, right? In hip hop and rap, it's not like that at all. If you have an idea, they're like, try it. Try it. Proof is in the pudding. And so I was really into that. And then the other thing that was kind of cool is that I'd never really felt accepted or part of any group ever in my life. And there were multiple times on these sessions where like my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, would be hanging out at the studio and she'd be like beating or making a fucking dream catcher, some shit like that, right? And this like hood dude would look over like, hey, what you doing? She'd be like, I'm making a dream catcher. What is that? He said, oh, she'd explain it to him. He'd be sitting there looking and he'd go, can you make me one? I was like, hell fucking yeah, sure. Like everybody was very open, very accepting. There wasn't any kind of like, I don't know. It's just like in other genres, and I hate to be generalistic about it, but I've just found like in certain genres and all that, there is definitely a way everybody's supposed to act. And there's like, all these rules about how you're supposed to do things, and everybody's really careful. But in the rap stuff I was doing, it was like very open. Like the idea that you could have 3 guys sitting in the control room writing a hook. And one of them is a guy who's nobody's ever met before. He just happens to be hanging out. And they're going to listen to the hooks, and they're just going to pick the best hook. At first, I was offended by this. I was like, oh, how dare you? But then I was like, wow, everybody's open to everything. So I did this album. It never made any money.
Now, when you say, just real quick, when you say crowds of people, how many people would be in the studio at any given, like max capacity at any given point in time? Like that you're bouncing ideas off
max
of and
capacity.
getting feedback from.
But, I don't know, 20 people in there. So, I don't know, it's like,
yeah.
And they'd be like, I'd be in the control room, and then they'd all cram into this little lounge, and they'd be freestyling in there, which I'd never heard before. I'd heard it when I had heard it in middle school and not realized that was, I was hearing it on the playground, but not realizing that's what I was hearing. The guys would be battling, but they'd be insulting. It's like, oh, it's interesting how their insults rhyme. I didn't realize that they were actually battling. So that was like amazing. Like, wow, like this is really, really cool. And it was like, I don't know, it was just a lot of fun. And, and so we did the album and we didn't make any money off of it, but everybody in town heard it. So I started getting booked a lot by people. And I just really remember liking Bone Crusher because he was just fun. And I think he liked me because I stood up to him. He tried to like finish a part and walk out of the control room. And I thought he could do better. And he's like, nah, that's good enough. And I went and stood in front of the doorway and told him, you can't fucking leave till you do another fucking day. And he's like looking at me. He's like twice my height. And he thought, shit, I'll go do it again. We just always had a really cool relationship. And so after the album was done, I was getting booked. And I just hit up Bone Crusher and I said, hey, you want to work on some songs? I took him out to a Taco Bell and bought him a burrito and we sat around and talked. And it's like, sure. So we just started working on songs and just for the fun of it. That turned into something like, I don't know, 50 or 60 or 70 freaking songs. I almost regret it. It's like he took advantage of that. It's like, you want to work on some songs? He'd call up. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh my God. And he'd show up. But I had so much fun. And then of course, Lil Jon had come in on that album. But the Full Contact Sports album, he liked what I did. He started booking me. Other people started booking me. I was working on Lil Jon's album. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. We were just I didn't know who Lil Jon was. I just knew he must be popular around town or something like that. And I had recorded on a song. It was actually a Bone Crusher song for his group Lyrical Giants, and I played mandolin on it, right? And I was like, cool. And I thought maybe they'd give it to their friends or something like that. And I remember driving around and I heard it go by in a car. And I was like, oh shit, he must know them. He must have given them a cassette. He's got friends everywhere. And then that same day, I go to a grocery store with my wife and I'm standing in line. And Crystal's like, what are you working on then? I said, oh, I got Lil Jon coming into the studio. And the cashier looks at me and says, you know Lil Jon? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, son of a gun, he's got friends in the grocery store. He's just got friends everywhere. Didn't occur to me that they were known in Atlanta. They were like not famous nationally, but in Atlanta. So Lil Jon came in that night and I'm like, hey, are you famous or something? He just laughed. He's like, I mean, kind of, And then I started to get a clue. I was like, oh shit, like this shit's getting played on the radio. And that was the other thing with Bone Crusher. We would like just work on a song, right? He'd come up and we'd just work on something. It wouldn't even be that great of a song. But he believed in everything he did. So he would like leave that night and somehow talk his way into the radio station and get him to play at like 1 a.m, right? That's when I was like, okay, I can't give out rough mixes unless I really work on them, And it just blew up from there. And I didn't really get into hip hop because I started listening to music and liking it. I'd never listened to it before. I didn't hardly know anything about it. Like when Yin Yang Twins came in the studio, I had no idea what they were fucking saying because they'd be like talking that god dang, SWAT's Atlanta shit, I was like, what the fuck? And then they'd say shit and laugh at me. And I'd ask Collie Park, their producer, knew him as DJ Smurf. Yeah, I'd look at him and say, well, of course we all call him Smurf. I'd be like, Smurf, what are they talking about? He's like, they're just making fun of you. Don't worry about it. And then years later, I realized these guys can speak better English than me. They're just fucking with me, man. They would do that shit all the time, like the white boy. But that shit was a blast. But the thing was, I really liked everybody involved personally. It was a chance for me to light the afterburners on my jet and just go with it. Like nobody was holding me back or putting restrictions on me. And I also knew that the records were going to be huge. I was actually doing a lot of sessions with Rick Beato at the time, who's a big YouTuber, but he was producing at the time. And I was kind of his engineer, like for him. And I didn't really enjoy doing it because he's hard to work with sometimes. But also I was sick of rock and roll. And I knew if I stuck with hip hop, is like, I could just tell where it's going. It's like, I'm going to have a hit record and I want to try that. So I quit working with him. I said, I'm going to focus on rap music for a while. And it was just like, I just want to see how far I can take it, And it was a great, I thought I'd just do it for a couple of years. I think I did it almost exclusively for about 10 years, And it was just crazy, dude. It's like, I play mandolin. I don't know why the fuck, I don't know how the hell I got involved in this shit.
Just being open, just being willing and open to new experiences happening and to trying something out, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But like, one of my mottos is the key to happiness is low expectations. And when you're at that level, anytime something happens, it's great.
Well,
and
sorry to interrupt you, but I have incredibly high expectations, which is part of the problem.
Well,
I'm only learning at this point in my life to have low expectations. But the thing was, I'd spent, at the point this was happening, I was in my piece, and I'd spent years with bands with these expectations, and everybody would like wuss out. They wouldn't push the record. They wouldn't really go and gig. They wouldn't really push their careers, but these guys, they exceeded my expectations. They're like, I'm going to get a record deal. And I'm like, sure. And then like 6 months later, they got a record deal and they're walking in the studio with the president of a record label. I'm like, they did. Yeah.